Thank you so much for joining me on the show today.
My pleasure as always.
All right, now let's get the ball rolling now. We're talking about the agenda for the new FIRS board and the new chairman. What would you say that should be?
Yeah, I think the risk always is that once you are appointed into a position such as the head of the FIRS, there's a tendency to quickly jump into making promises and commitments. Like we had it 4 years ago about, Fowler then said they're going to increase revenue by 300%, and then it started rolling back. So we're just saying, you guys need to take a step back and first make an assessment of what is it that is on ground, and also don't be quick to try and discontinue with everything. What is it that is working that you can inherit and even make better? And what are the areas where we can do better? So our view is that, and it's also good now that there's a board as well, because that helps with governance. There's no way one person can be all in all to make all decisions without a sounding board. So we do think that altogether, at a critical stage we are in Nigeria today with regards to revenue, it's important to get it right. And getting it right starts with who heads the FIRS, which coincidentally is also the head of the Joint Task Board. So this is a national issue and not just limited to the federal government alone.
Okay, do you have anything to say, or you want a question?
No, I agree with him because there's lots of programs that were announced in the last 4 years, like VADES and various other programs, and we didn't really hear what happened with those programs. So it'd be good to find out which of those programs worked, how much has actually raised from those programs, and which programs continue, because one of the problems we have is that every time there's a change of leadership, there's a new program that comes in, and we don't follow on from what happened last and try and learn from what worked and what didn't work in the last ones and bring them through. So I totally agree with that we shouldn't throw away the baby with the bathwater. Let's see what worked and stuff. And key programs like VADES, which was a big announcement, but we didn't hear anything after that.
Yeah. All right, but looking at the personnel in form of the board and the new chairman, do you think they'll perform much better than the previous chairman? And then how do we go about running an FIRS without a board for 8 years?
Okay, so it's not only the FIRS, sadly. So there's so many government agencies that do not have a board, even as we speak. And we're just getting used to doing the wrong things, unfortunately. So clearly having a board, there must be a reason why even in the private sector you have a board of directors. So this governance body is all over the world for every organization, whether they're profit-making or not for profit. So I do expect that having a board in place can only be a positive thing. But beyond that, to the point that Kayode made as well, how can we build institutions within the FIRS and the tax agencies across Nigeria? Because you also have to think about the role with regards to customs. Customs is a revenue generating agency, and you have so many other MDAs. In fact, in the law establishing the FIRS, it says that the FIRS has a role in overseeing and coordinating all the revenue generating activities of Nigeria. So that we haven't seen a lot in that regard. And there's always I would say, disproportionate focus on tax collection, particularly immediate tax collections. Now, tax administration is a lot bigger than that. Collection of tax revenue is just a small component of tax administration. So we're hoping that we'll be able to get to a point very quickly where we can even have a revenue strategy for Nigeria that speaks to national development, the stage of our development, where we are. How do you address informal sector? How do you ensure accountability and transparency, recruitment of personnel? All those issues that we need to deal with to ensure that while we are dealing with not having revenue enough to run governments today, we also don't do things that are counterproductive to development in the immediate, medium, and long term. Because at the end of the day, we say tax is how you share in the prosperity of businesses and individuals. So fundamentally, you have to focus on how do you ensure that there's prosperity in the first place before you can talk about tax revenue.
Okay, you have anything to add, or you want to ask?
No, I was just going to ask, what would you, if you're sitting with the new FIRS, what would the 3 things you would ask him to focus on?
Yeah, I like that question actually, and I'm planning to sit with him like next week. We already have agreed. I'll say the first one is people. People in terms of first within the FIRS, who do you have, where are they, Are they competent to do the work they're doing? What else do you need to do to enable them? Then process will be my next point. What's the process for issuing assessment, making payments? We have online they've been talking about for years, but the adoption rate is around 1%. So why is it that taxpayers are not using the online platforms? What can we do to make that process better? Getting refund is almost impossible. So all those processes, we need to look at them. And I say the third thing for me would be around reporting and accountability. How can you because it's difficult to pay tax. Nigerians don't trust government. They also don't trust tax authorities. How can we begin to address this issue of trust deficit? I think the starting point would be how transparent you are, and are you accountable to the people? So those would be, in my view, three most important issues to discuss with him.
Yeah, I kind of agree on the one on building bridges, because by default, you have too many people, first in the informal sector, who first are not even aware of the fact that they should be paying taxes in the first place, and how to get all of that in. But then I'd like to move to another topic now, which is around the Finance Act. They recently, signed the Finance Act, and understand the wider implications of that for the economy for Nigeria.
Yeah, so this Finance Act is one of the best things that I would say has happened to the tax system in more than 20, 30 years. In my entire period of practicing taxation in Nigeria, most of the things we have in our tax laws we inherited from the British. We have things like the Stamp Duty Act. It's a law of 1939 before we even got independence. And for some strange reasons, we did nothing. So it's like trying to force a square peg into a round hole. It's not going to work. Somebody got hurt in the process. So this is not like the silver bullet, but it's good progress. Particularly, I like the fact that there was a deliberate attempt to protect the vulnerable and to also help SMEs. So according to the Bureau of Statistics, we have around 40 million MSMEs in Nigeria. With the provisions in the Finance Act, more than 95% of those businesses will now be on 0% corporate income tax. They won't have to register for VAT or charge VAT. Let the burden of tax be more on the middle class, the upper class, and large firms who have the ability to cope. But also ensuring that you do not tax production and investment. You can focus on consumption, particularly because also in this Finance Act, there's more exemption now for basic food items. Before, bread, for example, was liable to VAT. Now, VAT is no longer applicable on bread. So you have expansion of the items on which there's no VAT. Overall, I think the impact on the economy is going to be positive, notwithstanding that many people don't like the 7.5% VAT rate.
All right, then. Kari, you have anything to add, or you want to ask a question?
Yeah, just going to ask a question. So do you think going forward there's going to be a Finance Act attached to the budget every year? That's my first question. And the second question is on this the 7.5%, because we see a lot of talk about it being an increase, but isn't it really important for state governments on this 7.5%? Because I think they get about 80 or 85% of that revenue, and with this new minimum wage, it really helped them try and pay that.
Yeah, indeed. So Mr. President has promised, to your first question, that this will be an annual event. I'm also on the committee that is working on the finance bill, and even the finance minister is keen to have this every year. In fact, one of the things we want to do is more engagement with the private sector and to get the finance bill ready ahead of the budget, so that when you're signing the budget, you're also signing the finance bill into law. So the second question, nobody likes to pay tax, including myself. Even in countries where things work, apart from Bill Gates and Warren Buffett, who want to be taxed more, normal people don't ask for more taxes. So when people say we don't like the 7.5% VAT, I do understand the sentiment. But if you also think about it, that government needs to meet certain things like paying minimum wage, particularly at the state level where many of them can't even meet their recurrent expenditure. How do you then increase? I know people will talk about wastage, corruption. I do agree, those are fundamental issues. But they're not the only problems we're facing. So this VAT increase is necessary to ensure that state and local government can at least meet the minimum wage bill.
Yeah, because it's very important, because when you look at 2019 or even the past 3 years, the government has struggled with revenues. Ensuring how those revenues come in, and on the fact that the DMO mentioned that they're looking to start some conversations around concessionary lending in a couple of days. But how I know it's not a magic bullet, but what other palliatives can we have to help out? And I need that real quick.
Yeah, so again, if you break it down in the tax law, you find out that there are a number of measures, not only the VAT increase in rate that has been designed now to raise more revenue. You have things to do with digital economy, services from abroad. You have things to do with deductibility of expenses if you already got tax exemption. So there are a number of issues. But I would say also beyond that, like I said before, we need a revenue strategy. I think there's too much focus on informal sector, particularly at local government level and state level. The incidence of multiple taxation is felt more by these small-scale businesses. And if you are looking to create employment, that is the focus for enablement, not punishment.
All right, then. Still a lot of work to do, but then it's little steps, and we have to see how things play out. Thank you so much for joining me on the show today.
My pleasure.
I've been speaking to Taiwo Oyedele. He's the partner and West Africa tax leader at PwC, and also my guest host, Kayode Akindele, who's the partner at TI Capital.